Hi everybody, my name is Nate, and you are watching WASD20, a channel about tabletop RPGs and fantasy maps. Or is it? The reality is, I have not been making very many videos at all about how to draw fantasy maps, and that's one of the things that a lot of you came to the channel for and subscribed for, and I understand that. The past, I don't know, half year or so, I've gotten lots of comments like, hey, when's the next mapping video? When's the next mapping video? Now, this is my struggle. Yes, I have been continuing to work on some new maps, I have been trying some new things and learning some new techniques and things like that, and I rightly should share those with you, but I just haven't been inspired to do that. So I'm hoping that this video can be a bit of a reset button for me, because in this video, I'm getting back to basics. The past couple years, I've done some huge, sprawling continental maps with all sorts of new techniques, and honestly, a lot of it's left me feeling pretty burned out, and I want to get back to my core style. I want to get back to some maps that I can accomplish in 3 or 4 hours rather than working on for like 20 or 30 hours. So when I heard from Emily Schneider, who is working on a young adult fantasy novel, I thought this is the perfect project for me to kind of get a palette cleanser in my mapping career. It's a smaller map, so that's one thing, and she wanted it in a simple style similar to my Izora map. So I'll be taking you along for the ride as I created this map from start to finish, and I'll also be talking a little bit about the process of working on commission maps for other people. But before we get to the map drawing, I do want to thank my sponsor for this video, World Anvil. If you're a dungeon master, world builder, or author, you have got to check out World Anvil. It's the best tool out there for creative people wanting a way to organize and share all of their world and story information. They've got amazing tools for linking articles, tagging maps, creating timelines, and for those times when you're struggling to find inspiration, they provide helpful prompts and ideas. There's also a huge community of users from around the world who support each other in their creations. So go check it out today for free over at worldanvil.com. So I generally don't do this on my maps, but on this one I'm actually starting with a rough draft in ink. Rather than doing light pencil lines, I thought I'm going to try some blocking in of the major features, and then I'm going to trace over it later when I want to do my final draft. Now, one of the really nice things about this map project is that Emily gave me a really great reference in the form of an incarnate map. If you're looking to get a map commissioned, I highly recommend this. Getting something, even if it's a rough sketch on paper, but something that is pretty close to the way you want your actual map to be, it's going to be really helpful for whoever's drawing it for you. And it could make them more likely to want to work with you in the first place. Now, if you want to learn more about the book where this map will appear, it is called Scales of Ash and Smoke, and Emily's shooting for a September release date on that, and I'll put a link to her website down in the video description so you can keep tabs on when the book is out. After blocking in a lot of the major features here, I actually took my kid's Crayola light table, and I am not going to use this to trace directly, but I have it under my final sheet as a reference so that I know exactly where to put my more polished mountains, my more polished trees, etc. I'm not sure I have a great feel yet for the process of using a light table and how that can be a benefit, but I've been wanting to try it, and I need to refine that a little bit further here. Now, the original map actually didn't have any little islands around the edge, but I think that always makes a map look better, so definitely wanted to add a few of those. After tracing the coastline, it is now time to do the wave effect around the outside. And I've done a few different types, but for this one, it's a pretty time-consuming process, but it's what my client wanted, and I really love the way it looks, even if it is a bit tedious in the process. The key to these more tedious processes, this and things like drawing lots and lots of trees, is to let it be kind of meditative. Maybe put on a good podcast or some good music and just vibe with it. So as I'm getting in the rhythm of drawing these nice little wave lines here, this might be a good time to talk about what I mentioned earlier, burnout from drawing maps. Now, I think a lot of this can apply to other areas too. things like running Dungeons and Dragons game, things like painting miniatures, whatever it might be, a lot of us do experience creative burnout. And for me, what I've found in this is a need to get back to basics, a need to get back into some things that I can accomplish in a short amount of time and feel good about doing something. These past couple years, I've taken on some pretty big mapping projects, and I've tried lots of new styles and new things in drawing maps. And overall, that's been good for me. But I think the downside of that is that I've perhaps overextended and felt a little bit overwhelmed at times, a little bit out of my depth. So for me, again, this map is a nice smaller project that I can just feel good about accomplishing. And it's in many ways getting back to a basic style, kind of rediscovering some of the joy in simplicity, like returning to an old, well-worn couch. It's actually kind of comfy. But another tip for avoiding burnout, and I think this is true of any hobby, and yes, map drawing is a hobby for me. I am not making a living at it. It is a nice supplementary income for sure, but I'm mostly doing it because I enjoy it. And so with any hobby, whether it's running D&D games for your friends, whether it's painting miniatures, if you're starting to lose that joy, know when to take a break and just call it quits for a little while. And there have definitely been some times in the last several years where I've just said, you know what, I've got a few months here and I'm not going to do any map commissions during this time. And that's important too. The same thing can be true of painting miniatures, of running D&D games. Call it quits for a bit and come back to it when you start to feel the itch. Or maybe if you're running D&D games, you need to take a break from a long campaign and try running a fun little one-shot. Or if you're painting miniatures, try a simpler miniature in a simpler style and just go for a nice quick little speed paint so you can feel like you're accomplishing something. I think a lot of what I'm saying here applies to many hobbies. For the next step here, I'm going to be drawing the mountains. Now, I also felt like this southern region just needed a extra something, so I added another lake and river there. It's always nice when a client gives you the freedom to be able to do that. I mean, the ideal situation is probably that, no, it doesn't need any of this stuff. It has everything it needs, but no, sometimes you just want to add a little something, and it's nice when you have a client that gives you some of that liberty to do that. Added that in here, and later you'll see me altering the path of the river a bit. I felt like it was just too straight. But anyway, continuing on with the mountains. I'm doing these in the same style as I did the Azora map in general. The mountains in the north, she wanted to be more of like almost like a desert hill sort of style, so you see me doing those slightly different. But if you want to see more detail on how I'm drawing in this style, go check out the How to Draw a Fantasy Map series, because in that series I do break down the style and how I'm drawing what I'm drawing in more detail. I'll put a link to that playlist right up at the top. Next up, the meditative, not tedious, process of drawing lots and lots of trees. Simple style here. First I do the triangles, then I go back and do the trunks, and then I scratch in 2 lines for my little shadows. For those little shadows, that's about the only part of this map I think that I'm going to be using the 005 Pigma Micron. That is the thinnest Pigma Micron pen I have. For most of the rest of this map, I'm using a size 1, size 2. There's a couple points where I might be using like a size 4 or 5. Now that the trees were in place, it was time to do the mountain shading. So going in with my size 1 pen here, I'm just doing a squiggly ridge line, kind of giving it some variety, and then doing some kind of diagonal hatching down the side of the mountain. Now for some of these settlements, I did off camera do some sketching and just get some ideas down from what I might like to do. There were only 3 settlements that really had like true buildings, if you will, in Emily's map. The rest were just marked with little dots or diamonds, so I mimicked that in my map. Right here you do see me doing some little terrain lines, little sprigs of grass and dots and hills, and sometimes just little horizontal scratches with my pen, just to give the impression of different sorts of terrain. All right, here is where I'm going to transition to digital. So from the beginning, I did want to do at least the text on this map digitally. That's just something I find a lot neater and cleaner. And while I'm at it, I decided, let's do the border and the compass as well digitally and do a little touch up on some other things. That really kind of frees me up and keeps me from stressing out too much when I'm doing the ink work on a map. The thought that, okay, anything I mess up on too much, I can just go back in Photoshop and I can fix. If you want to see more about how I draw maps digitally, I will put a link to a video up at the top specifically on that topic, some of the tools that I use and the techniques. For me, I use a scanner. I just do black and white, and then I'm not going to talk about every little detail of what I do to get the map looking good here, but I usually do duplicate the map and change the layer style to multiply in order to really kind of intensify the black line of the map that sometimes shows up a little too light when I scan. So after about 10 minutes of just kind of general cleanup, changing the path of that river, etc., you see me messing with the settlements and really trying to get those looking cleaner. I wasn't too satisfied with how they came out, so I'm doing quite a bit of altering to those, and in some cases starting from scratch. Next, the compass rose. Oh man, this is always a struggle for me. I just end up spending like an hour drawing things over and over and being unhappy with how they look and eventually setting on a certain style. I feel like I need to take a class on how to draw compass roses better. Same with borders. You'll notice me doing a lot of the same with the border, just kind of messing around with things. You're missing actually a lot of the off-camera, just kind of doodling on paper that I'm doing, trying to find a style that I'm satisfied with and that looks good. So I would say that overall this was about a 4-hour map, maybe a little more if you count some of the off-camera stuff. And I think that probably about an hour and a half of that, at least, was just messing around with the compass rose and border. Now, I don't always do a compass and border on maps. They're not necessary, but most clients do want them. And I totally get it. It gives it a nice kind of finished look to the map and makes it look complete. Next up, we are doing the settlement labels, and this is very easy, quick process in Photoshop, and that's why I really like it. I find that when I'm doing it by hand, it's just a really, I guess, nerve-wracking process, just trying to get my letters neat and really trying not to mess up. So I love just being able to slap them on here in Photoshop and have them look nice and clean. In this case, I put a nice white stroke around the edge of the text to make it stand out when it's over a forest or a mountain range or something like that. Getting tired out by the compass, you see me coming back to it here now, and then I do get to the border as well, and it's settled on a pretty simple style for the border, and using some Photoshop tricks always helps. You can just make a rectangular selection, then you can stroke that with a black line, add a couple more of those. You can get lots and lots of lines this way, and then you see me kind of going in and just stamping in some white ovals to give it a little bit of texture in that middle line. After doing that all along the left side of the map, I will just copy and paste that over to the other sides of the border. So all said and done, as I said, I think this was about 4 hours. The screen capture, the video actually here, was about 3 hours, but I'm adding a lot more time for some of that off-screen stuff, some of the doodling. It's really hard to estimate how much time that is, because sometimes I'll be just watching a TV show and I'll, grab a sheet of paper and decide to start doodling some border ideas, and it all kind of bleeds together. But yeah, this was a really fun map to make. Emily was a pleasure to work with in terms of being a clear communicator and just kind of letting me do my thing. So yeah, let me know what you think of the map down in the comments below, and especially let me know if you have any future suggestions for mapping videos. I need your ideas, people. Come on! Alright, that's all for this one, everybody. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I also want to thank the amazing WASD20 patrons for their support of the channel. Patrons are people who support on a monthly basis, and they get some pretty cool rewards too. Things like weekly live map drawing streams with me, and access to my Icewind Dale campaign diaries, among other things. So go check it all out over at patreon.com/WASD20. Thanks, patrons. All right, take care, everybody. You'll see me again very soon.